Hey guys, welcome to The Point. I'm Anna Kasparian, and today we're going to talk about the American dream. We're going to talk about how the American dream has changed from generation to generation, and we're also going to talk about our obsession with ostentatious displays of wealth. But before we get to all of that, it is important to talk about the Boston bombing. Of course, it's topical and it's timely, and we want to have a broader discussion about whether or not it makes sense to have this collective guilt, to make generalizations about an entire population of people based on what a few extremists do. Before we get to all of that, of course, we want to meet our panelists, so let's do so. Fred Karger is a former political consultant and political activist. He was also the only openly gay Republican candidate for president in 2012, and also many are still in the closet. And you know, do you know anything about that? Do you want to share a little?
I can't comment on that.
You don't want to out anyone?
Not today.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. Ryan Singer is an LA-based comedian who regularly appears on Mark Maron's WTF podcast. 2012 saw the release of his second album, Comedy Wondertown, which I'm guessing you recommend everyone buy.
Yeah, I'd really like that. I bought 1,000 of them just recently, so I think everybody else could buy just one.
Well, it's like Sarah Palin buying like thousands of her own books just to make sure she gets on that you know, bestseller list. Just kidding, she probably didn't do that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, I hear about people doing that with like movie tickets when their movie comes out.
No way, really?
Buy out the
so maybe I just base my idea of reality on the TV show Entourage, and that's a mistake.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And Kelly Carlin is the host of The Kelly Carlin Show. You guys have seen her on The Point before. She's on Sirius XM, her one-woman show, a Carlin Home Companion, and a weekly podcast, Waking from the American Dream, which, oh my gosh, what a coincidence. We're going to talk about that today.
How did I get here?
All right, so let's get right to it, shall we? Of course, the first segment has to do with the Boston bombing, and our first video is from the uncle of the Tsarnaev brothers. His name is Ruslan Tsarni, and here's what he had to say to the press when the suspects were still at large.
Were they ever caught up in the fighting in Chechnya?
No, they've never been in Chechnya. It has nothing to do with Chechnya. I say, Dzhokhar, if you're alive, turn yourself in and ask for forgiveness from the victims, from the injured, and from those who left. Ask forgiveness from these people. We're not requiring forgiveness in this family. He put a shame on the our family, Tsarnaev's family. He put a shame on the entire Chechen ethnicity. Because everyone now they play with word Chechen. So they put that shame on the entire ethnicity. So that's what I would say. Turn yourself in.
So he did contradict himself a little bit there because he opened that statement by saying, this has nothing to do with Chechens. And then he went on to say that he shamed the entire Chechen community. So that's really the discussion we want to have right now. Is it fair to make generalizations about an entire population of people based on what a few individuals do? And of course, we've had a problem with that in the United States, where you have Muslim extremists carrying out these terrible acts of violence, and then people in the media will blame Muslims in general for being violent people. Now, Fred, I want to start off with you. What are your thoughts on this? Is this something that you think is fair? Is it something that is unique among Muslims, or do we see it among other communities as well?
Well, I think it's just a part of our fabric. We have pride in our nationality. If an American does something, I think all Americans feel some guilt or something, and if your ethnicity or race or religion, whatever it is, you have an identity with that. But you know, we're hearing for the first time these self-radicalized Islamic fundamentalists, which it appears these brothers are. But I remember during that period, when the bombings happened, we were speculating whether it was an American terrorist or these Islamic terrorists. And we were seeing more of these self-radicalized terrorists, like at Fort Hood with that massacre there of the gunman, of the major, killed 13 Americans in the military. And then the Times Square bomber, which fortunately did not go off. But these are radicalized Muslims, and it's a problem because we need to work on our immigration policy and Homeland Security to try and flush these people out. And apparently these two brothers slipped through the FBI in their attempts to contain this.
But do you think that it's fair that members of the media and politicians immediately start to speculate and assume that these people are Muslims when we've had numerous tragedies and numerous acts of violence on U.S. soil that involved white guys. I mean, Adam Lanza is one example of that. You know, these mass shooters, you know, Oklahoma City bombing, those types of instances didn't involve Muslims. So why is it that we are so willing to immediately speculate and point fingers at Muslims?
Well, I think that is just a sign of the times, but it was probably a 50-50 call. We're watching all the media at the time try to speculate, and of course we don't know, and we still don't know, and we won't probably until the trial happens.
And I think it's always the other. I mean, it's like it's not who we are, it's the people in the other group, and I think that's human history, you know. The people in the other tribe are always blamed for things, you know, and depending on what part of history you look at, you can pick out who's being demonized by the culture. And you know, I think a lot of us were sitting there holding our breath, you know. It's like, oh, if it's a Muslim, it's like, oh, we got to deal with that again. And then it cranks up all this whole hysteria that direction. And then if it's not a Muslim, there's relief. But at the same time, it's like, what is that saying about how people are dissatisfied with our culture in general and what they're willing to do to make a statement about something, which clearly these kids were, you know.
There has been an evolution of the speculation, I think. Because I remember when the DC sniper, when he was on the loose, or when he wasn't caught, it was speculation between, at least in Dayton, Ohio, where I was living at the time, it was, is it going to be a white guy or is it going to be a black guy? That was the big debate. Like, oh, you know, my black friends would be like, I hope it's not a black guy. And then my white friends would be like, I hope it's a black guy. Or I hope it's not a white guy, because then it's like the serial killer white guy. They've got that pretty much on lockdown. I mean, I think we've got that on lock. Like, if you're going to be a serial killer, the stereotype is you're going to be a white guy, probably my age, well educated. But
less hair.
Less hair, yeah.
It's the less hair.
Do you guys really feel that stereotype exists, though? That you know, white people pose a threat? Because you have these mass shootings that do involve white people, and we don't seem to make generalizations about white culture.
I think it's weird because I think it's almost not a stereotype as much as it is kind of a joke to certain people. Like, oh, all the serial killers are white guys. So there's definitely a softer edge on that stereotype, if it is in existence.
Well, and I think in our culture we pick other things to blame. We pick poor people because they're lazy, or, you know, I mean, it depends. Gender issues, you know, when you have like this kind of homogenous, there's a large white population in America, so we find other ways to divide ourselves and to pick on each other. And yeah, I mean, I think percentage-wise, it's probably as many crazy, you know, radicalized white. There's probably more actual numbers of white people willing to do radical acts in this country because there's more white people in general. But I mean, look at the people who are stockpiling guns and food and caves, and I mean, it's a large number of people doing this now. It's kind of frightening.
It is frightening, and one thing that definitely worries me is the fact that you know, our Department of Homeland Security no longer or doesn't really focus on right-wing extremism in the country as much as they used to. There was this great piece written in Alternet where they talked about how the Department of Homeland Security caved into pressure from Republicans because they didn't like the fact that they were focusing on right-wing extremism. So they had you know, numerous people focusing on that type of extremism, and then later they scaled it back to one individual in the Department of Homeland Security focusing on that type of extremism. So that's a real problem because all of these talking heads that you see in the media are having a huge impact on government policy and what we're really focusing on when it comes to so-called terrorism. And why is it that whenever we use the word terrorism, it's like synonymous with Muslim? Is it because of the fact that, you know, I mean, we've had cases of terrorism that didn't involve Muslims, so why is it only strictly used for Muslims?
Well, I think 9/11 made a huge, I mean, it really wounded our psyches in a big way. And I think people didn't maybe pay attention to it as much because it was overseas a lot, like the Kenyan bombing and stuff like that. It was Muslim terrorists, but on our soil, except for the original World Trade Center bombing that happened, you know, there hasn't, you know, I think, you know, I mean, 9/11 really terrified people, and it was such a dramatic thing, and so we're all afraid of that thing happening again, and it's going to be those people doing it. You know, that's kind of our safety, our survival mode that we go into.
And I mean, I definitely do not mean to belittle what happened on 9/11. I mean, that was the worst U.S. tragedy imaginable. But at the same time, I think that, you know, that led to actions by American politicians that can be deemed terrorism. Doing drone strikes, doing signature strikes, you know, creating this hostility toward the United States is not making the situation any better. I mean, you know, you wanted to run for president, and, you know, what are your thoughts on all of that? What do you think about our actions abroad when it comes to so-called terrorism?
Well, according to the one bomber who's in the hospital, he said that their motivation was our the government's role in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Well, we're pulling out of both of those, and so this has been stewing, I think, with a lot of people. But there's a lot of animosity towards this country. We are the American dream. We have immigrants trying to come here every single day, legally and illegally, because this is where the wonderful world is located, where people have opportunity. And so I think it's getting better out there, but we have a lot of enemies around this world. And President Obama, I think, has actually helped to calm a lot of that, because he has tried to be more of a balanced leader, as opposed to George Bush, who was more polarizing and less popular around the world. He was more concerned in being a tough American, kind of a cowboy. So I think things are getting better, but as long as we have a free society, as long as we have access to this country, either by travel or through immigration, we're going to have problems.
What do you guys think would happen if the bombers were white as opposed to Muslim? Like, do you see, you know, this situation playing out differently? Ryan, I want to start with you.
Well, you definitely wouldn't have random white people being attacked on the street, being accused of having done, oh, you were involved, because then you would have to attack everyone around you, depending on what neighborhood you live in. So I think, I don't know, it's fear will bring out the worst in everyone, and tragedy, you know, that comes from fear is even worse than that. But it's like, even watching the video of the uncle, it's like, I've only seen it twice. I watched it yesterday and then today, and it's very stirring. Like, you can see that, like, I imagine the subtext of it is, we have moved to this country, our family moved to this country to try to have a better life, to have the American dream, and these nephews who we have destroyed that for this family now.
Yeah.
Now he's not going to be able to go anywhere without being, that's the guy. That's the guy who, oh, he acted like he was mad about it, but, you know, what were they reading, those kids, after dinner? You know, like, how much under their breath comments about America being evil, you know, so people are just going to speculate, and that's what's going to happen.
I love that, you know, that he also talked about them being losers, which we didn't show, because I think ultimately, on some level, that, I mean, if you're going to harm innocent people like that, I'm sorry, that puts you in the loser category. It's like, this is not how to get your political point across, and certainly not in this country. And I get people are frustrated, and look, you know, I'm very frustrated with some of the policies of the Obama administration. The droning, I mean, the drone strikes, it's a nightmare to think about what's going on. But, you know, young males who are underemployed all across the globe are pissed off because they don't have a future, and they don't have a lot of power, and they feel like they don't have a voice, and this is how they're channeling that rage, and they have access to weapons of mass destruction. That's terrifying, that this is the conversation we're having now on this planet, when we have so many other big conversations to be having. So, you know, I would have been slightly relieved if it was a white person, because then I think we could have had a new conversation in America, which is maybe about, as I'm guessing it would have been a right-wing person, because they're really pissed off and terrified that Obama's going to put us in camps, and I mean, there's all these conspiracy theories out there, and maybe we would have had a different conversation about, you know, what we need to watch out for, and who's feeling alienated in this country. I mean, that's, I think alienation feeds this.
The New York Times recently had this op-ed where they talked about the importance of assimilation, and, you know, how difficult it can be for immigrants, especially Tamerlan. I mean, he came to the country when he was 16 years old, so he's already older, and it's difficult to assimilate as it is, but if you don't, you're already put at a significant disadvantage. And one thing that, of course, was very memorable about what he wrote on his Facebook page was, I don't have any American friends, I don't understand them. So they already feel isolated, and what does that isolation do to them? How does it help convince them to turn to something like, you know, extreme religion or fundamentalists? So anyway, we're out of time with this topic, but we will come back and have a discussion about the American dream. It has changed significantly, but some people argue that it doesn't even exist anymore. Stick around.
Welcome to the Fact Zone. I'm Brooke Alvarez. Right now, we're continuing the Onion News Network's coverage of the death of the American dream. The end came at 12:14 p.m. this afternoon when the last person in the nation to believe that America is a land of boundless opportunity, that is Edward Tuffy, a bar owner in Pennington, Illinois, quietly let go of the dream while watching television and eating cereal on his couch.
Now, of course, that was a clip from The Onion, which does satire, but satire is unfunny unless there's some truth to it. So, Kelly, I want to start off with you. I mean, you have done some coverage on the American dream. What are your thoughts on it? How has it changed?
Well, I mean, I think I think it changes through the decades and different times, but I think really it changed in the 80s. I mean, the whole country changed and everything turned into me, get as much as you can. And there was something before that where the American dream would include everybody. There was a common good, you know, aspect to it. And now people are ruthless. They don't care. They just want their Kim Kardashian moment. I don't know. It's so strange. I mean, with reality TV and everything. And you know, I think Gordon Gekko, you know, was a great role model of how not to do it. And yet he became a role model of how to do it. And something switched in the American psyche during that decade. And now we're kind of living in the aftermath of that with the deep recession and the bubbles bursting and the fact that everyone, only in the 1% has the real American dream, you know, truly.
So what did the American dream mean to you? Because I feel like there are many different perceptions of it.
I think for me, I try to keep it very personal, and for me it's about a sense of possibility, and that, you know, that even though, I don't remember who said it, but, you know, democracy is not the best system, but it's the best one we have, or something like that. And I think that's true, too, of the American dream. We have amazing freedoms in this country, and there is a lot of possibility. You can work hard, and if you get lucky, you can make it far. But there's been a dampening of it, though. I really felt that the last 5 years that people are kind of given up on something here.
I mean, it's like this obsession with Ayn Rand's ideology, and, you know, forget collectivism, let's focus on the individual, get what you want, and do so by any means necessary. Ryan, what are your thoughts? What is your idea of the American dream?
It's the never-ending story, the movie. Everyone, when people give up their dreams, Fantasia dies. I think America is Fantasia right now. Everyone's giving up their dream. When I meet somebody who just wants to be a teacher or a nurse, I mean, maybe it's because of the show business life, I'm inspired. Like, oh, not everybody wants to, not everybody, there's still people out there who care. And I almost was run over by a 96 Astra van about a week and a half ago, so it was like the closest I ever came to dying. And I could do nothing but smile. Like I hugged the car, jumped out of the way, I was kind of on the hood and then swung into the side, and the woman was very upset when she realized she kind of hit a person, but I could just smile because I realized I'm living the American dream right now. I make my living doing stand-up comedy. I'm like right at the poverty line, technically.
Yes.
But I make a living doing what I love. I don't live well at all, but I live the best, if that makes sense. So I think it is possible. Also, I was given an upper hand. I wasn't born into abject poverty, so I have opportunities. I always kind of have a safety net. Not everybody has that in this world, which is unfortunate. If you're lucky, you don't have to even use it. But I think if you can, I'm an optimist, so it's hard for me to get on board with the American dream being dead. I think evolution is possible with even concepts. I think Kevin Kelly in a TED Talk said evolution always heads towards specialization and complexity. So the American dream isn't dying, it's becoming more specialized and complex.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So that's the way I'm kind of trying to wrap my brain around what's happening.
I like that.
So you said so many interesting things in that answer, and one thing that really stood out to me was what you talked about with your, you know, financial situation. You know, I think that if you did a poll of Americans and you asked them what does the American dream mean, they will always point to wealth. It means that you are wealthy, you are living in a house that you own, you have 5 kids and you have this beautiful car and you know, you work a job you like, that's fine. You have all the opportunity you want. But a lot of it has to do with wealth. So I love the idea that the American dream is really about doing what you really feel passionately about for your career. But at the same time, I think about, you know, a friend of mine who went to school to be a teacher. She wants to teach children with developmental, you know, issues, and she isn't able to do it because it's not going to make her enough money to live. She's going to be below the poverty line, so it's going to be difficult for her. And Fred, I have to ask you, since I asked, you know, everyone else, what do you think the American dream is? What does it mean to you?
I just think living in this country, we have a huge advantage over every other nation in the world. And you go to consulates around the world, to American consulates, and see the lineup of people just waiting to get a visa just to come here. We are very fortunate. We've of course, like a lot of countries and a lot of times, we have had our ups and downs. I fault President Obama. I think he could have gotten us out of this disastrous recession a little earlier if he'd been a little more upbeat. And I actually, during my campaign, I prescribed Zoloft for him. When his first term, he was very depressed, hunched over all the time. But Reagan, who I used to work for, he had this eternal optimism. He had this Morning in America campaign, and he lived it too. And he made people feel good, and he inspired people to go out and live the American dream. And that's the bully pulpit of the President of the United States. And I think and I think Obama's hitting his stride a little more in this second term. He can be himself. And I think if he can help lead us through this great recession into prosperity, I think everybody, and my dream is to get people who are homeless off the street and into an apartment, and people in apartments into condominiums, and condominium owners into homes, and just moving up and making life better for our children. And that's really what the American dream is to me.
Wouldn't you argue that Reagan is the one who made the country shift from collectivism to individualism, though?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think just as much fault could be given if you're using that argument to Bill Clinton. I mean, the 90s were far more prosperous for this country than the 80s. More millionaires and billionaires were created during that period than
You're absolutely
80s.
right about that, but Bill Clinton also increased the tax rate for the wealthiest individuals in the country.
He did, who benefited then by the roaring economy.
Right.
It's hard to say. Yes, there was a lot of opulence in the 80s, and of course the Reagans from Beverly Hills and former actors became this role model, and all their friends, all their wealthy friends. And so there was inspiration from that, but I think what the president can do, and is so important for this country to bring us out of our downturns, is to be this cheerleader in chief, and to use that bully pulpit, not just to make laws, but to go out and really encourage people to do things. And of course, a lot can be done through our state legislatures, through our federal government, but I just think I have great hope for this country. Travel around this nation and look at all the prosperity that we have, and it's not the 1 or 2%. Great standard of livings are happening really in so much of this country, and again, the children of Americans have a much better opportunity, I think, to really succeed than they ever have.
Well, you know, I like that you're in favor of the optimism. I like the fact that you think that the president should be more upbeat about it. But there are significant problems with the way our system is built right now, especially when it comes to corporate tax rates, when it comes to the privatization of public education, you know, when it comes to the privatization of our prison system. All of these things are creating, you know, this issue where those who aren't born into wealth find it increasingly difficult to actually live the American dream, to work in the career that they want to work, you know, to buy a home at some point. Just recently I read this article in the Wall Street Journal about how the people who created the housing bubble and destroyed the housing market are now benefiting from it, because these people in Wall Street can spend millions or billions of dollars to buy multiple homes in cash, which means the middle class can't buy homes. Well, so
I think it's bigger than politics or Wall Street. You know, I think it really is this cultural mindset. And I think starting with the 60s, you know, it became very much a focus on the individual and freedom, and you know, and that fed into the 80s. I mean, I don't think Reagan's, you know, I think he was an example of that, and we elected him because of this. But and I think there is you know, there needs to be a swing back to the we, and I think there's going to have to be a serious crisis for us to be able to look around each other and realize that we're going to have to take care of each other. And I really believe that global warming is going to do that, because at some point it's going to get uncontrollable, and we are all going to see that it's too late probably, and that we're going to need to get our shit together and to band together, not just in this country, but nations, to survive this huge catastrophe that's going to come about. And I hope that it doesn't get too ugly and too strange and too weird before we do that. But like any individual who is in depression or anxiety or addiction, you know, they have to hit bottom in order to say that they want help and they need help and there's a problem. And I don't think America has hit bottom yet.
I thought that was going to happen. I thought, based on some very loose research that I kind of did in the 90s, I realized we were at the height of economic prosperity in our country, but we were also at the height of the most people ever on antidepressants. So it was like, well, to me it was like, oh, money doesn't equal happiness. You hear that all the time, but people want to learn that lesson the hard way. But I just, when Obama in 2008 was during his campaign saying there's going to be some tough times ahead, I thought he was using code words for like some real austerity stuff was going to happen. Like we're going to start getting rationed food. And I was like, I'm on board with this. Like I am so ready to, you know, fix this thing. And then, you know, the years went by. That wasn't a good election for me. My girlfriend and I lived together at the time, and I lived in Ohio, the swing state, which made it possible for him to be president. And they were getting ready to announce him elected, and I was starting to cry. And then my girlfriend walked down the steps of our apartment and told me she was leaving me at that exact moment. And so I was like, this isn't the change I was hoping for.
Oh my God!
No hope? There's no hope. But then I was like, hope, change, hope, no.
That's great.
But then,
was she a McCain supporter?
yeah.
I'm out of here.
Couldn't have been you.
Yeah, she did hold me prisoner for a couple of years. No, but I really think that we do have to hit bottom. We have to bottom out, and I hope, it's my hope that we already did it, but I think it's a fundamental change in the perspective of what happiness is.
Yep.
Because financially, there's never going to be any kind of success long-term for this country. It's always going to go up and down, right? Like everything else.
Back.
Yeah.
The deficit's dropping, prosperity is coming back, people are feeling better about themselves and their country.
They are. I agree. There is a bit of a shift in that. And yet, I mean, I do some life coaching with people, and a lot of the questions I ask people is, what is your definition of success? And it's rarely what we get from the culture. It's this much more personal idea of fulfillment. Like you were saying, you're living your dream right now because you get to do your creative work. You're starving part of the time and you're living on a certain level, but that's fulfilling for you. And right now that's more important than a certain amount of money in your bank. Yes, both would be great. I know, I totally get that because I do 20 jobs too. And but there's something about individual fulfillment, and maybe that is the shift in the American dream.
Yes.
And part of it for a lot of people I talk to is that they want to give back. They want to lift other people up, and that's becoming important again, and that's exciting.
I love that we finally got to that part of the discussion because, you know, there has been, you know, study after study done on millennials and what their thoughts are on the American dream. And it's no longer what it used to be where, you know, you own the home and you have the white picket fence. It's more about having, you know, social mobility. It's more about being able to go to another country and travel and experience different cultures. And, you know, just to give you guys, you know, some information when it comes to social mobility. When it comes to the list of industrialized countries, the US comes in at number 10 when it comes to social mobility. Denmark is at number 1, then Australia, Norway, Finland, Canada, Sweden, Germany, Spain, France, of course a bunch of European countries. But what I'm starting to notice is, you know, a lot of Americans are moving to those European countries and they're experiencing those cultures. So
Denmark typically comes in as one of the, if not the happiest country in the world. On a yearly basis, and they have the highest tax rate, or one of the highest. I speak beyond the scope of my understanding. I think Wendell Berry said that, and
sounds good.
It's a good person to quote, though.
Yeah, and it identifies. I can identify with that. But you have the highest tax rate, but you also have the happiest, and you have the highest social mobility.
And the best.
I'm not saying that I'm a socialist. Or a eugenicist, but maybe there's a lot of people in this country now, a lot more. There's 7 billion people on the planet now. There's a lot of luxuries walking around. Like I'm a luxury. I'm not needed in the tribe to. There's not, you know, I can't, you know, to survive.
You're not growing radishes.
Yeah, exactly. So once we've expanded beyond necessities as people, then it's just, we can just become all hardwired, and we spend so much time in our cars. That's a very unnatural thing. Like, we're just living unnatural. So I don't know. I'm not saying that we need to get rid of a bunch of people because I would be the first one to go.
I can think of some people.
But
Anna's willing to go there.
Yeah.
All right, we're out of time for this segment, but stick around for our next, which is my favorite segment, where we will talk about ridiculous displays of wealth in reality TV and why Americans are so freaking obsessed with it.
Cut a lot of checks, that's the life here on Sunset. Rich and famous, I am success. Better act late doing, she do love sex. I'ma sit this, you do the rest. You know what you do the best. Do me a favor, lose the dress. We run late.
So some people think of the American dream as a ridiculous amount of wealth, and we see it depicted in reality TV all the time. Bravo is notorious for this, and I'm not criticizing them for it because it's certainly a guilty pleasure of mine to watch these shows. And I don't really understand what the obsession is. I just know that I like watching it. And Ryan, what do you think? Why do you think Americans, especially given the hard economic times that we're facing right now, why do you think they love watching these shows so much?
It's probably escapism. It's also the laugh at other people to make yourself feel better.
Right?
Which has unfortunately become the new preferred style of comedy viewing by the American audience, which is kind of upsetting for a comedian, because now it's all about, you know, getting roasted or, you know, exploiting someone who doesn't know. At least the viewers don't think the people know that they're being exploited, which, you know, it's all magic. But I remember I used to love Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, Robin Leach, when I was a kid. And my American dream when I was a kid was like, someday I'm going to be so rich, I'm going to have an island. You know, it's like I'm going to have an island.
Island.
Yeah, because I remember when you could name a star after yourself. Back when that first became a thing, I was like, oh, I should have a star. I should have an island. This is what you do when you become successful. And unfortunately, it's just laughing at other people, and it's easier to laugh at somebody else to make yourself feel better than actually take some pride in what you're doing and have some self-worth that way.
Yeah, my theory is that, you know, if the American dream has died and we really can't move up the mobility ladder, at least we can feel superior in some way. And so we look at these people, even these really rich, crazy people, and think, oh, they're crazy and they're narcissistic, and oh, well, at least I'm not like that. So there's a sense of power and pride in that, you know, and a protection of our own identity in some way. And, you know, and for me, it's always like, you know, wherever you go, there you are. If you're crazy, you're going to be crazy with money too. You know, it's like, that's what those shows show, you know, it's like lottery winners, you know, they run through all their money in 5 years because they don't know anything about, you know, how to deal with money. And so it's like a little bit watching a car wreck.
It has changed the mindset, I think, of maybe some younger people. People are like, oh, I can't believe these young kids doing all this stuff. It's like, oh, why can't you? It's being encoured everywhere you go.
The producers are whispering in their ear.
Exactly.
Of course. A lot of it's even scripted. It's
and why wouldn't you strive towards that as a young person when you see those are all the people getting success around you, at least allegedly, at least by what you can tell. Like, you don't need to work at your craft. You don't need to develop some kind of specific skill.
Yeah,
it's work at being crazy now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely encouraging people to be douchebags. Let's keep it real. I mean, you see it all the time, you know, whether it's like high school students, whether it's other people who are just attempting to be celebrities, they'll do something just to get a little bit of attention, and of course they'll be applauded for it. Just a recent case involved that anchor in North Dakota who got caught cussing on camera, and he didn't know his mic was hot, but now he's been invited to Letterman and he's doing all these national shows and he's this big celebrity, and I'm like sitting here feeling like chopped liver. I'm like, what am I doing? Talking about the American dream. I should cuss and like say ridiculous things and maybe I'll get a little more attention.
It's long-term consideration though. You have long-term consideration, which maybe it's a flawed view because I bought into the American dream when I was younger, but if you long-term consideration, it'll always pay off in the end. Stand-up comedy is something that you have to do for years and years before you find your voice. I figure once I'm 25 years in, I should be pretty good at it, and I should be able to have everything I want. So I've got a few more years to go. But people don't have the long-term consideration anymore. It's very short-sighted, and so it's short-lived.
I'm concerned these reality shows, I think, are the worst representation of America. Think what the world which envisions every one of us living like that, which is of course not true, and we export that around the world too, and I think it sends a bad message. But I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I remember the Kennedys. That was kind of our first exposure to the super rich and how they lived in Hyannisport, and Jacqueline Kennedy just always going to France and dressing, and of course that is good, I think, to elevate America and give us kind of that leadership feeling, but I think that we've gone a little on a detour on this with these reality shows. And it's also not good for the actors of America. It's displaced a lot of the good, I think, quality we used to have on TV a little bit more than it is.
Absolutely.
And see this trash TV, so I'm a little down on all that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the American dream in some ways, the Hollywood dream has become the American dream, and that it's all about celebrity. And you know, one thing about growing up in this business and being in this business, and I'm sure you can relate, is, you know, you can get caught up in it a little bit, like, oh, I'm invited to this and this is happening and this is kind of cool. But if it's not about the work for yourself every day, you know, it starts to get depressing really quickly, and you can see how people in this industry devolve, you know, into some of the crazy people on reality shows actually because of it, because it's not about the work, because what is the work about, you know, for them? And I think it's important that just in general, like in America, it's like, oh, I'll just do crazy things and I'll be famous. Well, great, now you have fame. What are you going to do with that? What are you doing in the world now? What is your purpose?
Like Kim Kardashian, who's like a millionaire.
Yeah.
And she hasn't really done anything.
Right. I mean now she has fashion lines, and because her fame brought her that, and maybe she can find some work to do in the world. That would be great.
She's a good promoter.
Yeah, yeah.
She is, and I feel like in order to become extremely wealthy, sometimes, I mean, look, if you are passionate about the work you do and you do so in a very humble way, sure, you might get far, but it's much more likely that you'll get far if you are a good promoter and you do things that are shameless and sometimes pretty freaking embarrassing. Yeah. Right?
Look at Paris Hilton. Look at what a great promoter she was. And Zsa Zsa Gabor. And some of these people who didn't really have particular talent or anything, but they were great at marketing and promotion. And you have to respect that in someone too, I think, with little talent, but great marketing ability.
It's a skill in itself, absolutely. I mean,
but the launch point for these people that we're talking about specifically, I think, relates to the idea that the American dream is a lot easier if you're wealthy. Kim Kardashian, her dad was very famous, about as famous as you can get when it comes to being a lawyer.
Yes.
Paris Hilton, I mean, that's obvious. But so these two women, like specifically, had a launch point of wealth and already had a leg up in fame. If, you know, Susie Jenkins from Louisville, Kentucky put out a sex tape with some guy no one knew either, because it was like, what? Why do I even know that it was Brandy's brother, right? Like, why? It makes me so mad that I even know that. Like, that is just so pervasive. Like, so those two people. So it's a perfect storm of inconsequential celebrity into a sex tape, which, you know, in the porn explosion, all that kind of stuff. So it was.
And you know what's so funny is, like, you think about documentaries, like cinema verite documentaries from the 50s and 60s, where you would watch real people in their circumstance, and it was fascinating because you were watching human nature. And so I think we're attracted to that a little bit with these shows. We want to watch human nature, but the fact that they're called reality shows and they are so far away from reality, it's like we're skewing our language even, and how we're defining reality now in this country. That's frightening.
That's definitely frightening. I worry about that all the time. But you know, while I do definitely agree that there is this obsession with these shows because of the fact that you get to point and laugh at people acting ridiculous, is there an obsession that we have with wealthy people that's also feeding into this? Do you think that people watch these shows because they want to live vicariously through these individuals?
There's always that fascination. Go to the supermarket and look at every single magazine there. It's celebrity. People love celebrities. It's just an infatuation we have, and they're bigger than life, whether it's sports or entertainment or political. And so that is a part of our makeup, and I think that's probably a good thing. It gives people something to aspire to, but it also is not quite that happiness. I think people at home with that wife or husband and 2.5 kids and the dog in the picket fence can be a lot happier than these Hollywood celebrities we see who are prisoners in their own home. So I think that we just have to define our own happiness.
Right. Will there ever be a time in the U.S. ever again where we applaud modesty and humble people that...
Oh yeah, the pendulum will swing.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, it'll be like 200 years from now probably or something. But the other thing too, you know, I think about, like, why do we read novels and watch movies? Because we want to, like, be in the protagonist's skin and figure out, would I do it that way? How did they get there? I mean, that's what, like, people read biographies now because they're fascinated by people's lives. And we're always questioning, like their strategies. How did they do it? How did they do it? And I think partly our fascination with the rich and the successful is, how did they do it? And is there a way that maybe I can find a strategy to bring more ease into my life? Because I think that's what money brings people, is a little bit of peace of mind and some ease. So I think we're always looking for clues, you know, and so we're kind of drawn to it in some ways.
I used to watch A&E biographies for that.
Yes.
I used to love A&E biographies. Like the one on Tom Hanks was so good. I was like, oh, I got to figure out. Oh, I can. It's probably the wrong message, but I was like, oh, I could, you know, have a couple kids before I'm successful. Like, and still become successful with kids?
Yeah, but
how is that possible? And I was like, oh my God, I can have kids and then maybe even get divorced. But, and then, you know, find happiness maybe later. But, yeah, but I think that's the difference between, for me, that's where I delineate between quality and celebrity. If you have an A&E biography, which I don't even know if they make them anymore, then you're a celebrity. If you have an E! True Hollywood Story, you're a flash in the pan.
Oh wow, that's a good way to look at it.
I like that.
That's
okay.
my delineation.
I agree. Yeah. That's
All
good.
right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Fred Karger, can you please tell our audience what you're working on and where they can find out more about you?
Well, I've got a website, fredkarger.com. I've got a Facebook page, fan page, and Twitter, at Fred Karger. And I'm working on a boycott of Amway, which is a multi-level marketing company out of Michigan, very homophobic owner. So boycott Amway.
All right, very interesting. Ryan Singer, where can people watch your stand-up?
RyanSingerComedy.com.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And Kelly Carlin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. KellyCarlin.com. Come find all my stuff there.
All right, sounds good. And I'm Anna Kasparian. You guys should be familiar with me by now. You guys can watch me every day on the Young Turks between 6 and 8 p.m. Pacific time on youtube.com/TYT Live. We'll see you next week with another episode.